Oh god, I hate recording myself. Oh shit. Now it's not gonna focus on me. So obviously things are really weird right now. Everyone's in quarantine. We can't record new episodes here at Anything and Everything. Things are just weird, you know? Things just kind of suck. So what I thought might be cool for those who are interested is to show you guys how we make the podcast. So that comes down to everything like the equipment we use, how we set up the set, things like that. So for those of you who might be thinking of making a podcast, hopefully this is interesting for you. And this is just a way for us to kind of get content out and to keep you guys updated with what we're doing and give you guys something to watch and whatnot. So hopefully this is interesting. If not, I'm sorry, but we're trying here, you know? So first things first, let's start off with the set. As far as setup goes, I usually set up one camera in this corner of the room, which is the shot you're looking at now, and this is the shot that's typically on the guest. And then I'll set up a second camera in this area of the room, which is typically our wide shot. Ideally, I'd love to set up a third camera as a close-up for Tyler and Leonard, just so we have 3 angles to cut to and from. But cameras are expensive, and here at Anything and Everything, we don't have that kind of budget. We don't have a budget. We don't have any money. I don't have any money. None of us have any money. What am I even saying right now? So if you've watched all of our episodes, you may have noticed me struggling with like a solid lighting setup. I first started with light stands like directly in the frame, like in front of the guests, and it just didn't look very good. And then I got kind of smarter and put the light stands behind the guests, not in front, like over here, but over here. That didn't look very good either. And then I tried to do a really janky setup where I'd set the lights up in the blinds here so that there would be no light stands in the frame, which I think looked the cleanest. So I think that's what we'll stick to for now once this whole quarantine's over and once we can actually film again. So that's it as far as setup. Let's move on to the actual equipment. So quick disclaimer, we use very minimal and cheap equipment compared to the other video podcasts out there. By no means are we, using top of the line stuff. But again, we make it work and, we do what we can. So with that being said, let's start off with the cameras. So for the wide angle shot, I use a Sony a6300. This is a mirrorless 24 megapixel APS-C crop sensor camera, and I typically use a Zeiss 16-70 f4 lens for the wide shot. So for those who care, this camera shoots in 4K at 30 frames a second and 120 frames at 1080p. And it's honestly a great camera for what we use it for. This was my first mirrorless camera and I absolutely loved it for the time being. The only thing that I really don't like about it is the battery life and the fact that it overheats if you shoot in 4K for an extended amount of time, which I guess is normal for mirrorless cameras. But so this camera is a little dated now, but for the money it's perfectly fine for what we use it for. And even if you're using it for other things like photography and whatnot, it's a great camera. However, you may notice that the quality of this camera really doesn't compare to the quality of the camera I'm using now, which is typically the camera that's on the guest. So this camera is a Sony a7 III. This camera is a 24 megapixel full frame camera that also shoots 4K at 30 frames a second and 1080p at 120 frames. And typically for the shot, I'm using a Tamron 28-75 f2.8 lens. Pretty basic lens. I mean, I could have gone with the more expensive Sony lens, but it's expensive. So this camera and lens setup is, I guess, a step above entry level, you can say, but it is still very modest for the bodies and lens combos that you can have. And for those who are trying to make a video podcast, you definitely don't need 2 camera angles. You can very well get away with just having one wide camera angle for the whole podcast, and that works perfectly fine. But I do think it makes it a little bit more interesting to be able to cut to 2 cameras just to emphasize who's talking. So let's talk about audio, which I think is probably the most important thing in podcasts, since it's a podcast. So again, audio-wise, we use nothing fancy compared to the other podcasts that are out there. For instance, for the mics, we use 3 Samson Q2Us. These are very affordable mics at $50 each. So the reason I chose these mics is because of the price. $50, it really isn't that much compared to other mics out there. I know a popular mic for podcasts are the Shure SM7Bs, but at $400 each, I just, you can't justify that price. At least I can't justify that price. That would be $1,200 just in mics for 3 of them. So that just doesn't make any sense to me. And I think the audio we can get out of the Q2Us is pretty damn good for $50 each. So you definitely don't need the top of the line stuff to make a podcast, is what I'm trying to say. So these 3 mics are then run to a Zoom H4n via XLR cables. This audio recorder is great because it allows me to record 3 separate audio files simultaneously while monitoring each one. And this audio recorder is kind of the older version of the lineup, which makes it pretty affordable, and it still performs really well and still a relevant audio recorder in my opinion. So last but not least, the lighting. Again, nothing fancy. These are Viltrox VL-200. I don't know why I got Western there. These are Viltrox VL-200 lights, which you can find on Amazon for like $200. And it comes with 3 light panels, 3 light stands, 3 of everything essentially. I really like these lights because you can not only adjust the brightness, but you can also adjust the color temperature as well, which is really great for white balancing and everything like that. So yeah, that's pretty much it. Like, there's not that much that goes into recording these podcasts. Again, we could make this a lot more complicated by adding top of the line equipment and spending a lot more money on mics and audio recorders and whatnot, but I think for the equipment we have and the non-existent budget we have, I think we do a decent job. I think really the main thing in any podcast is the content that you're putting out. Not to say ours is the greatest either. We are figuring that out and we are learning. The key, I think, is to have a great idea. And it is definitely not the equipment that you use. Like with anything, you could have the best equipment, but if you don't have the fundamentals and the basics of what makes a great podcast great, which is content, then I don't know if your podcast will really go anywhere. Again, not to say ours is the best by any means. We are still learning, but I think it starts with the content, and I think it starts with the stories. So keep that in mind if you are trying to make a podcast and whatnot. Invest more time into the meat of the content rather than the fancy equipment. So yeah, with that being said, I hope you guys are all safe. Hopefully this whole thing will be over soon. We are itching to record new episodes. I know we have a lot of guests lined up. Yeah, hopefully this will all be over soon. But in the meantime, we'll see you guys soon, hopefully. Peace.